Well, if you go back to the year 1990, private client work was very unfashionable everywhere. Law firms were about big deals and big sums of money, and the people who worked in private client work were in dusty offices at the back of a law practice or accounting practice, and that was the same in the UK, bits of the States, and private client work had not been heard of in some parts of the world. And a man had an idea. George Tasker was an accountant, and he wanted a networking group for people like him, and he was interested that group should be cross-disciplinary. And it was like a Lonely Hearts Club, if you like. Well, George was amazed. He put a letter into a magazine, and rather than having 50 or 60 replies, he had several hundred. And a meeting was held in Baker Street for 64 original signatories to STEP, but within a year there were over 1,000 members. And what made it grow was that it was that Lonely Hearts Club, that people began to exchange ideas and knowledge across disciplines, and they also found out they had very special learning needs, that the crossover of law and accountancy was very attractive. And word got round. And soon someone turned up from Jersey, someone turned up from Geneva, from Miami, and recognised that trust and estates practice and private client work were distinct. They were parts of law firms and accounting practices that had a great deal in common. People who appeared from trust companies as well. And people began to set up branches. And 4 years down the line, someone had the dangerous idea of saying that people had to pass examinations to get in. And though some said that would kill the organisation, the effect was absolutely the reverse, because it set a standard for what was emerging as a separate discipline. And people also began to see that actually private client work it wouldn't make you mega bucks tomorrow, but it would provide a very steady stream of income for practices over a consistent period of time. Let's face it, people carry on having problems over taxation, inheritance, people die, they have new families, they own family businesses. This work will never go away. And so STEP spread around the world. But it was still very, very English, and that was a problem, because lots of people now in STEP are not very English at all, and that's the great joy of the organisation, that it brings people together across disciplines. And gradually branches appeared with different ways of doing things around the world. But there was still that common message that we're about inheritance and generational change, and we can learn together. Conferences began, and the first STEP conference, Jonathan Cook, the then treasurer, told me, people just did a ring and a prayer. They took money from their own bank accounts. Mike Kodesky in Canada, running the first STEP Canada conference, financed it from his own credit card, and people had faith. And lo and behold, delegates turned up, and events that were booked to 120 people got 150 or 160. There was latent demand. But of course, the STEP family got to be different in every part of the world, and I think it's better to say we're not a unitary organisation, we're a diverse community. We're all members of one organisation in STEP, but we're all different in what we do, and that's again one of the great joys, that joy of learning about difference. And so as people joined, they found the flavours were different, and in Switzerland, for instance, as branches appeared in Zurich and in Geneva, their focus was rather more cross-border. It was rather more on matters happening in Europe. Of course, STEP spread to the Caribbean. A lot of global business happening from Asia, from the States, very different indeed from the business of someone on the high street in Manchester or in Toronto. And I mentioned Canada. We suddenly found 2,000 members in Canada because a group of Canadians saw there was nothing like STEP for Canadian domestic and international practitioners, and they built it from nothing in the space of 3 or 4 years. It has a distinctly Canadian flavour, it has its own governance, its own different emphases. In Canada, for instance, you will find insurance practitioners who are members of STEP because the qualifications in that discipline there are much higher than in most other disciplines. And for most STEP members, what's so important is that gold standard of practice that brings everyone together, and what matters is whatever qualification you have in inheritance and generational change, that you are on the right side of that gold standard. And so the community carried on growing. Branches started to appear in the States in about 1997-98, but it didn't really take off until 10 years later. People said that because the state has an enormous internal market, and because it has trust and estates councils and bar councils on a state basis, STEP wouldn't work. Quite the reverse. There are now 1,000 STEP members in the USA. Because STEP is different, the focus really is on cross-border and international. It's a different flavour, but people are doing the same work. So what started as one man's vision, which he says literally was an idea had over a cup of tea, has become a very diverse global family. What unites it is the same thing that George Tasker felt would unite a few hundred people in the UK, the desire to learn and the desire to recognise that difference can be a strength, that it can bring different experiences to different cases, and that we can exchange knowledge and so serve our clients better. What also gives it great strength is George's belief that it would be a diverse organisation. For him, the diversity then was the uniqueness, that STEP was the only UK professional body that brought together accountants, lawyers and financial advisors and bankers. There was nothing like it. Today that diversity is expressed by the fact that we have different issues in planning, on intergenerational issues around the world. We have different approaches to how we run our branches, we have different regulators, we have different educational requirements, but we know that it's all in the same broad envelope, and we know that a problem that might appear in Singapore will appear in a different way in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or in Edinburgh in Scotland a little while later. And therefore, by talking and learning and developing qualifications together, we can all benefit our clients and we can grow stronger businesses. And I think that though STEP always has been diverse, and it's grown more diverse and will be more diverse still, it's that belief in learning that has united everyone. Everyone can see that benefit, that is why people join. But they also see an organisation which is very, very happy and indeed encourages people to be incredibly local. That if your needs, say in Los Angeles, offer qualifications that are focused upon the Pacific Rim, upon the people who come from India or from East Asia to that part of the world, STEP will develop it for you. STEP will find people who have that expertise, or it will grow it. Again, if your need is not jurisdictional, if you are someone whose focus in STEP is on litigation, on mediation, dispute resolution, for instance, if there is interest, STEP will grow that qualification for you, and that too becomes part of the STEP family. If you look back at the beginning of that 20 years, it is, I think, fair to say that the STEP that started under George Tusk and then Geoffrey Schindler was almost like a society of expert watchmakers. These were people who made the best trusts in the world. But it's become an organisation with much greater focus on estate planning, intergenerational change, the issues of complex families, of ageing of family business. It's been a natural progression. But that evolution hasn't challenged anyone. There were issues in STEP about halfway through its existence about people who thought they were domestic and people who thought they were international competing. There was almost a split. But those people came together and recognised that actually the problems you encounter dealing with an elderly client who's losing capacity, with a family business that might be local or international, with a dispute over a will, they might differ in scale, they might differ in jurisdiction, but they are the same problems and that they will need the same solutions. People also realised that actually there wasn't much domestic anymore. Now, I remember soon after I joined STEP going to a branch in the west of England, I won't say which one, where there was a certain feeling that why are we funding all those folks to do qualifications in the Caribbean or in Singapore? I went back there several years later, and the committee dinner was all about their international clients, people who'd come to live in the UK, who had problems about French connections or Polish relatives, or had come to find the best advice for global problems, even though their interests were very local. Perhaps their son or daughter had married an American, for instance. And there was a recognition it was all one family with different problems, and that I think has been the key to STEP's success, that big envelope, that tolerance and that willingness to learn.